Hello. I'm joining another project already in progress. This is redoing the ceiling in my van. I got tired of the old bins and overhead compartments that were rattling and squeaking and drooping and sagging. So I ripped it out. And when I ripped it out, I really didn't have a plan on what I wanted to do to go back. I just had a few things that I wanted to accomplish, like having more headroom, having less noise, and having a sleeker look on the inside. So the first thing I did was work on the driver's compartment. And I used a piece of luan, which is a very lightweight plywood, and drew it into the shape of, by using the old piece that I took out, getting the shape of the front, which is curved, and making it go all the way across from side to side. I put in an extra support so it will be stronger at the back and not sag and not rattle whenever I'm just doing regular driving. So the first thing I did was take that board and cover it with the new fabric that I picked up at Hobby Lobby. I got headliner fabric there. It's a little bit different color, but it's okay. I cut that to size, and then I spray glued the wood and then smoothed the headliner fabric out on that piece of wood and then installed it in the van. I did have to glue a couple of places, pieces of wood at the front to anchor it to, because there was nothing there before. Before, it was installed in a really strange way. I can't even describe it. It was almost like a floating ceiling kind of thing. So now it's in very permanently, it's in solid, and it's very strong. Next step is to put in the trim that goes over the windshield and behind the sunshades. Okay, I got that piece up without too much difficulty. Basically, you poke it up in here, and these things just kind of, it's like a little slot in there that fits around it. This is some of the old fabric that I pieced from another. I took it off the back part that I'm not going to reuse, and made a new one because the old one was dirty and it had some holes in it. So, okay, I'm going to put the sun visors on later after I get this up. So right now I'm mounting this thing. This is the light control. It also controlled the TV and the speakers that I took out that had to do with the TV and the VCR. I'm not going to use that, but I'm going to leave it in there. And then here's where my two pot lights go. Okay, I'm putting the pot lights in. What I did is when I took them out, I took a marker and just wrote on there which color went to where. Like this to orange, this to white, and that to black. And I also made a little writing of what goes where. Okay. I used masonite, which is very flexible and very thin, an 8x4 sheet to put back inside the main compartment. I cut it into 3 pieces because it was too big to manage on my own in one big sheet, and I started installing it at the front and then worked my way to the back. I screwed it to those ribs that you can see in the fiberglass. I had to pre-drill because fiberglass, the screws wouldn't just go right into it. It's very hard. Then I glued the fabric, and that was really hard, doing it with gluing the fabric all in one piece because it was very big, 8 feet long. And so what I did is I brought it in and I sprayed glue on the middle of it, the middle part. And I tried to smooth that out as best I could to get it up there. And then I sprayed the front and kept continuing and just little by little smoothed it out as best I could. There are some wrinkles in it. There are some places where it's sagging a little bit. I'm going to try to work on those eventually. None of it is like put me off. I'm perfectly happy with how it came out. I did reinstall the little pot lights. That turned out to be a challenge. I had to go down the little channels between the ribs, and I taped that up as best I could with some duct tape to hold it in position until I could get the board up. But then the pot lights that were already in the van that I wanted to reuse were at least 1.5 inches like thick. So I had a problem there. I solved that problem by using some one by one wood pieces, little scraps that were about 4 inches long, and stuck it between the ceiling, between the fiberglass ceiling and the masonite. And that created a little void of about an inch so that the backside of the pot lights would have room to go up in and mount flush. I did the top, then I started working on the sides. The sides ended up being the hardest part because there was just nowhere to anchor anything, and I didn't think far enough ahead and glue more wood pieces down that side. In retrospect, if I had done that before I put my headliner in, because it came down the sides, you see, it kind of wrapped down the sides by about 8 to 10 inches on each side. And so if I had put the wood in, glued some wood pieces for anchoring prior to doing that, it would have been a big help. But I didn't realize at the time that I was going to need that because, like I say, I had no plan. I just ripped it out and started saying, okay, what am I going to do now? So it was kind of like, okay, addressing each situation as it came up. And so I ended up covering 2 more pieces of the long luan that I was able to salvage from the original roof or ceiling, and covered that with some of the old fabric that I also salvaged. I had to piece it here and there, but it worked out well enough. And I put those down on the sides and I anchored them as best I could from the bottom, where there was some wood left there in place from the old original conversion. So I put one on one side. I did like a V-shaped shelf, for lack of a better word, and so it's just like a place where I can just stash things, and just stick them down in there. It's about 6 inches deep, and basically I can put like I've got my some electronics up in there, a little fan, just various items that I want. And on the other side of the side, I put two like little stash pockets I made up out of some of the old scrap that I had. And those just, I put a piece of wood frame around them that was also part of the old uh, overhead thing. Some wood that I salvaged, some of the framing bits of wood, and covered that and then screwed that up so that it supported these two pockets. And you can just put things down in there easily. Just reach in, put them in. Those are going to be temporary because I didn't have enough fabric to make them exactly the way I wanted. So I just used what I had for now. And when I can find more fabric and something that matches a little better, or even a nice mesh fabric that is tightly woven so you can't see through it, would also work. And I actually want to make 3 pockets. I only had enough to do 2. So that's what I did. So I'm considering that temporary. And since it's just 4 screws right on the front that holds them on, easy to take them off. And the back bin that I was talking about earlier that has the air conditioning hose in it and one compartment, it kind of got almost destroyed on the 2 ends when I was dismantling the old top because it had been screwed through that and into the back end of those old bins that were on the side. So when I took it off, there were big holes and scratches and everything in those where they had attached those bins. So what I ended up doing is first I sprayed it with a more metallic paint so it would brighten up because it's so dark back there, and that did help. It reflects light, so that did help brighten it up. And then I covered over those 2 ends that had been damaged with just some of the scrap fabric and just glued that on, and that worked. And I made a little trim piece to go around the top because I did push it up just a little bit, and I strengthened the board at the bottom that is the main support for that because it would bounce. It was just made out of that luan, which is very flimsy, and there was very little support for that. So I did put in a board along the front that helps support the weight of the cabinet and the 2 hoses, and got that all back into position. Was a lot harder than in reality, it was hard to do. But I got it in, and it looks fairly good. So I'm pretty happy with it. It's much stronger than it was. The last thing I did to spruce up the interior um, was to go back to the front and add the enclosure, the piece to enclose that overhead compartment. So I had once before, after I first removed the TV that was in there, put a board up there and cut 3 holes in it and stuck 3 little bins through those holes. And I went and found some mesh fabric and I just duct taped it. Actually, the 3 little bins that I bought were 3 little bathroom trash cans, 3 little trash cans in a gray color. And I took the mesh and I put it up about halfway across the opening and I just duct taped that around and stuck them through the holes that I cut out. And it was great storage. So, but this time I decided to go with only 2 bins because I end up putting a upright support in the middle of that overhead compartment to stop it from sagging and to help support it. So that meant I couldn't put the center bin in place. So I only went back with 2 bins, and that's fine. I can use the other one now as a regular trash can in the van. So I put 2 plastic bins back in, and then I had a mesh pouch that had been part of a store on the back stash, kind of a storage pouch system, and I cut the mesh bag off the bottom and I actually attached that up there, and it has a little velcro, so it's great for putting lightweight things in. And I also decided to spray paint the lower parts of the doors, the barn doors. So I got a gray paint and I took them off, sprayed them, and then put them back on. I also sprayed the carpet inserts because it doesn't really matter. I'm not going to be walking on that carpet. And it looks pretty good. The color wasn't exactly what I wanted. The cap was a little misleading on the can, but I like it. It's fresh and clean looking. So I hope you learned something about how simple it is really to just jump in and do something. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be wonderful. It just needs to be functional and it needs to please you. So my van is old and I probably won't be reselling it for anything other than scrap when the time comes. So I'm not worried about offending the next buyer. The one thing I did do is add some lighting. You can see in the third picture that's coming up. That's some of the old lighting that I reused. I have 3 more strands that I intend to put up. If you notice in the back section, there's 2 little wires sticking out, and that's where it's going to connect. I was waiting to see exactly how I want to position that before I made the decision, and now I have made a decision. So I put everything back in the van, made up my bed the way I do when I'm camping, put my rugs back in place, and I think it looks really good. It's very cozy, and I think it's going to be a lot warmer with the extra insulation that I put in. So I hope you enjoyed the following along on how I did my van. I didn't record every single step because it would have been an hour long, but this should give you some ideas of maybe what you can do. Hopefully it will. All right, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.